Hey guys, I hope that you're having a great week. Um, we are almost at the end of our book. It's getting really, really exciting, and I just really am sad that we're not all together to finish it up. I think that we could have had some really, really good discussions, and I really just wanted to see your faces when we read the next couple parts. So, know that I'm disappointed, but I could not pass up the opportunity to read it with you. I mean, I'm not with you, but this is as close as we could get. So, we are going to read chapter 11 today. I'm going to try to get through the whole chapter. I know, a whole chapter all in one sitting. But it's not as long as the other chapters have been. So, I hope that we can make it through. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get started so we can get through it because the chapters are long. But this is not as long as the others. But there's not really a good stopping point in this chapter. You all would have killed me if I would have stopped in the middle of the chapter. So, we're just going to get ahead and get started on chapter 11. Roll of thunder, hear my cry, over the water by and by. Old man coming down the line, whip in hand to beat me down, but I ain't gonna let him turn me round. The night whispered of distant thunder. It was muggy, hot, a miserable night for sleeping. Twice I had wakened, hoping it was time to be up, but each time the night had been total blackness with no hint of a graying dawn. On the front porch, Mr. Morrison sat singing soft and low in the long night, chanting into the approaching thunder. He had been there since the house had darkened after church, watching and waiting as he had done every night since Papa had been injured. No one had ever explained why he watched and waited, but I knew. It had to do with the Wallaces. Mr. Morrison's song faded, and I guess he was on his way to the rear of the house. He would stay there for a while, walking on cat's feet through the quiet yard, then eventually return to the front porch again. Unable to sleep, I resigned myself to await his return by counting states. Miss Crocker had a big thing about states, and I sometimes found that if I pretended that she was naming them off, I could fall asleep. I decided to count the states geographically rather than alphabetically. That was more of a challenge. I had gotten as far as west as the Dakotas when my silent recitation was disturbed by a tapping on the porch. I lay very still. Mr. Morrison never made sounds like that. There it was again. Cautiously, I climbed from the bed, careful not to awaken Big Ma, who was still snoring soundly, and crept to the door. I pressed my ear against the door and listened, then slipped the latch furiously and darted outside. "Boy, what are you doing here?" I hissed. "Hey, Cassie, would you keep it down?" whispered TJ, invisible in the darkness. Then he tapped lightly on the boy's door again, calling softly, "Hey, Stacy, come on, wake up, will ya? Let me in." The door swung open and TJ slipped inside. I pulled my door on closed and followed him. "I'm in trouble," Stacy said. I'm really in trouble." "That ain't nothing new," I remarked. "What you coming here for?" whispered Stacy icily. "Go get R.W. and Melvin to get you out of it." In the darkness there was a low sob, and TJ, hardly sounding like TJ, mumbled, "They the ones that got me in it. Where's the bed? I gotta sit down." In the darkness he groped for the bed, his feet dragging as if he could hardly lift them. "I ain't no bed," I exclaimed as his hands fell on me. There was a deep sigh. Stacy clicked on the flashlight and TJ found the bed, sitting down slowly and holding his stomach as if he were hurt. "What's the matter?" Stacy asked, his voice wary. R.W. and Melvin," whispered TJ. "They hurt me bad." He looked up, expecting sympathy, but our faces, grim behind the light Stacy held, showed no compassion. TJ's eyes dimmed. Then, undoing the buttons to his shirt, he pulled the shirt open and stared down at his stomach. I grimaced and shook my head at the sight. "Lord, TJ," Stacy explained in a whisper, "what happened?" TJ did not answer at first, staring in horror at the deep blue and black swelling on his stomach and chest. "I think something's busted," he gasped finally. "I hurt something awful." "Why'd they do it?" asked Stacy. TJ looked up into the bright light. "Help me, Stacy. Help me get home. I can't make it by myself." "Tell me how come they did this to you." Cause I said I was going to tell what happened." Stacy and I looked at each other, then together leaned closer to TJ. "Tell what?" we asked. TJ gulped and leaned over, his head between his legs. I'm sick, Stacy. I gotta get home before my daddy wake up. He say I stay away from the house one more night and he's gonna put me out. And he mean it too. He put me out. I got no place to go. You gotta help me. Tell us what happened. TJ began to cry. But they said they'd do worse than this if I ever told. Well, I ain't about to go nowhere unless I know what happened, Stacy said with finality. TJ searched Stacy's face in the rim of the ghostly light cast by the flashlight. Then he told his story. After he and the Simpsons left the Great Faith, they went directly to Strawberry to get that pearl-handled pistol. But when they arrived, the mercantile was already closed. The Simmonses said that there was no sense coming back for the pistol. They would simply go in and take it. TJ was frightened at the thought, but the Simmonses assured him that there was no danger. If they were caught, they would simply say that they needed the pistol that night and intended to pay for it on Monday. In the storage room at the back of the store was a small open window through which a child or a person as thin as TJ could wiggle. After waiting almost an hour after the lights had gone out in the Barnett's living quarters on the second floor, TJ slipped through the window, opened the door, and the Simmonses entered, their fat faces masked with stockings and their hands gloved. TJ, now afraid that they had something else in mind, wanted to leave without the pistol, but R.W. had insisted that he have it. R.W. broke the lock on the gun case with an axe and gave TJ the much longed-for gun. Then R.W. and Melvin went over to a wall cabinet and tried to break off the brass lock. After several unsuccessful minutes, R.W. swung the axe sharply against the lock and it gave. But Melvin reached for the metal box inside. Mr. Barnett appeared on the stairs, a flashlight in his hand and his wife behind him. If you remember, Mr. Barnett is the one that kicked Cassie out of the store for complaining that they had to wait. So this is the same man. After a long moment, no one moved and said a word as Mr. Barnett shone the light directly on TJ, then on R.W. and Melvin, their faces darkened by stockings. But when Mr. Barnett saw the cabinet lock busted, he flew into frenzied action, hopping madly down the stairs and trying to grab the metal box from Melvin. They struggled, with Mr. Barnett getting the better of Melvin, until R.W. whopped Mr. Barnett solidly on the head from behind with the flat of an axe. Mr. Barnett slumped into a heap upon the floor as if dead. When Mrs. Barnett saw her husband fall, she dashed across the room, flailed into R.W., crying, "You N-words done killed Jim Lee. You done killed him." R.W., trying to escape her grasp, slapped at her, and she fell back, hitting her head against one of the stoves, and did not move. Now, R.W. and Melvin have like these stockings over their face, so in the nighttime, they would look like they have really dark skin, so that they think that all three of them are black. Once they were outside, TJ wanted to come straight home, but the Simmonses said they had business to take care of and told him to wait in the back of the truck. When TJ objected and said that he was going to tell everybody it was R.W. and Melvin who had hurt the Barnetts unless they took him home, the two of them lit into him, beating him with savage blows until he could not stand, then flung him into the back of the truck and went down the street to the pool hall. TJ lay there for what he thought must have been an hour before crawling from the truck and starting home. About a mile outside of town, he got a ride with a farmer heading for Smelling's Creek by way of Soldiers Road. Not wanting to walk past the Simmonses' place for fear of R.W. and Melvin, had taken the Jackson Road home. He did not get out at the Jefferson-Davis Road intersection, but instead crossed Soldiers Bridge with the farmer and got out at the intersection beyond the bridge and walked around coming from west to our house. TJ, was them Barnetts dead? Asked Stacy. Then TJ grew quiet. TJ shook his head. I don't know. They sure look dead. Stacy, anybody find out? You know what they do to me. He stood up, his face grimacing with pain. Stacy, help me get home, he pleaded. I'm afraid to go there by myself. R.W. and Melvin might be waiting. You sure you ain't lying, TJ? I asked suspiciously. I swear everything I told y'all is true. I admit I lied about telling on your mama, but I ain't lying now. I ain't. Stacy thought a moment. Why don't you stay here tonight? Papa tell your daddy what happened. He won't put... No, cried TJ, his eyes big with terror. Can't tell nobody. I gotta go. He headed for the door, holding his side, but before he could reach it, his legs gave way, and Stacy caught him and guided him back to the bed. I studied TJ closely under the light. Sure, he was pulling another fast one, but when he coughed and blood spurted from his mouth, his eyes glazed and his face paled, I knew that this time TJ was not faking. "You're hurt bad," Stacy said. "Let me get Big Ma. She'll know what to do." TJ shook his head weakly. "My mama, I'll just tell her them white boys beat me up for no reason and she'll believe it. She'll take care of me. But you go waken your grandmama and your daddy'll be in it. Stacy, please, you my only friend. Ain't never really had no true friend but you." "Stacy," I whispered, afraid of what he might do. As far back as I could remember, Stacy had always felt responsibility for TJ. I'd never really understood why. Perhaps he felt even a person as despicable as TJ needed someone he could call a friend. Or perhaps he sensed TJ's vulnerability better than TJ did himself. "Stacy, you ain't going, are you?" Stacy wet his lips, thinking. Then he looked at me. "You go back to bed, Cassie. I'll be all right." "Yeah, I know you're going to be all right, because I'm going to tell Papa," I cried, dashing for the other room. But Stacy reached into the darkness and caught me. "Look, Cassie, it won't take me but 25 or 30 minutes to run down there and back. Really, it'll be all right." "You a big as fool as he is, then," I accused frantically. "You don't owe him nothing, especially after what he did to Mama." Stacy released me. "He's bad hurt, Cassie. I gotta get him home." He turned away from me and grabbed his pants. I stared at him. Then I said, "Well, you ain't going without me." If Stacy was going to be a fool and go running around at night to take an even bigger fool home, I at least could do was make sure he got back in one piece. "Cassie, you can't go." "Go where?" piped Little Man, sitting up. Christopher John sat up too, yawning sleepily. "Is it morning? What y'all doing up?" Little Man questioned. He blinked in the light and rubbed his eyes. "TJ, that you? What you doing here? Where y'all going?" "Nowhere. I'm just going to take TJ home," Stacy said. "Now y'all get back to sleep." Little Man jumped out of bed and pulled his clothes from the hanger where he neatly hung them. "I'm going too," he squealed. "Not me," said Christopher John, laying back down again. While Stacy attempted to put Little Man back to bed, I checked the porch to make sure Mr. Morrison wasn't around, and I slipped back to my own room to change. When I emerged again, the boys were on the porch, and Christopher John, his pants over one arm, was murmuring a strong protest against the middle-of-the-night stroll. Stacy attempted to persuade both him and Little Man back inside, but Little Man would not budge, and Christopher John, as much as he protested, would not be left behind. Finally, Stacy gave up, and without TJ leaning heavily against him, hurried across the lawn. The rest of us followed. Once on the road, Christopher John struggled into his pants, and we became part of the night. Quiet, frightened, and wishing just to dump TJ on his front porch and get back to the safety of our own beds, we hastened along the invisible road, brightened only by the round of the flashlight. The thunder was creeping closer now, rolling angrily over the forest depths and bringing the lightning with it. As we emerged from the path into the deserted Avery yard, "Wait till I get inside, will ya?" requested TJ. Sorry, guys. My bed's not very sturdy to hold the iPad. "Ain't nobody here," I said sourly. "What do you need us to wait for?" "Go on, TJ," said Stacy. "We'll wait." "Thanks, y'all," TJ said as he limped to the side of the house and slipped awkwardly into his room through an open window. "Come on, let's get out of here," said Stacy, herding us back to the path. But as we neared the forest, Little Man turned. "Hey, y'all, look over yonder. What's that?" Beyond the Avery house, bright lights appeared far away on the road near the Granger mansion. For a breathless second, they lingered there. Then they plunged suddenly downward toward the Averys. The first set of lights were followed by a second and a third until there were half a dozen sets of headlights beaming over the trail. "What's happening?" cried Christopher John. For what seemed an interminable wait, we stood watching those lights drawing nearer and nearer before Stacy clicked off the flashlight and ordered us into the forest. Silently, we slipped into the brush and fell flat to the ground. 2 pickups and 4 cars rattled into the yard, their lights focused like spotlights on the Avery front porch. Sorry, this is like, the light is really bright all of a sudden. There we go. Caleb Wallace and his brother Thurston, his left arm hanging akimbo to his side, pounded the front door with their rifle butts. "Y'all come out here," called Caleb. "We want that thieving, murdering inward of y'all's." "Stacy," I stammered, feeling the same nauseous feel I had felt that night when the night men had passed, when Papa had come home, shot and broken. "What are they going to do?" "I don't know," Stacy whispered as two more men joined the Wallaces at the door. "Why, ain't that R.W. and Melvin?" I exclaimed. "What the devil they doing?" Stacy quickly muffled me with the palm of his hand as Melvin thrust himself against the door in an attempt to break it open, and R.W. smashed the window with his gun. At the side of the house, several men were climbing through the same window TJ had entered only a few minutes before. Soon the front door was flung open from the inside, and Mr. and Mrs. Avery were dragged savagely by their feet from the house. The Avery girls were thrown through the open windows. The older girls, attempting to gather the younger children to them, were slapped back and spat upon. Then quiet, gentle Claude was hauled out, knocked to the ground, and kicked. "Claude," whimpered Christopher John, trying to rise, but Stacy hushed him and held him down. "We got to get help," Stacy rasped, but none of us could move. I watched the world from outside myself. Then TJ emerged, dragged from the house on his knees. His face was bloody, and when he tried to speak, he cried with pain, mumbling his words as if his jaw was broken. Mr. Avery tried to rise to get him, but he was knocked back. "Look what we got here," one of the men said, holding up the gun, "that pearl-handled pistol from Jim Lee's store." "Oh, Lord," Stacy groaned. "Why didn't he get rid of that thing?" TJ mumbled something we could not hear, but Caleb Wallace thundered, "Stop lying, boy, 'cause you in a whole world of trouble. You was in there. Ms. Barnett, when she come and got help, said 3 black boys robbed their store and knocked out her and her husband, and R.W. and Melvin Sims seen you and 2 other boys running from behind the store when they come into town to shoot some pool." "But it was R.W. and Melvin," I started before Stacy clasped his hand over my mouth again. "Now, who was them other 2, and where's that money y'all took?" Whatever's TJ's reply, it obviously was not what Caleb Wallace wanted to hear, for he had pulled his leg back and kicked TJ's swollen stomach with such force that TJ emitted a cry of awful pain and fell prone upon the ground. Lord Jesus," cried Mrs. Avery, wrenching herself free from the men who held her and rushing toward her son. "Don't let him hurt my baby no more. Kill me, Lord, but not my child." But before she could reach TJ, she was caught by the arm and flung so furiously against the house that she fell, dazed, and Mr. Avery, struggling to reach her, was helpless to save either her or TJ. Christopher John was sobbing distinctively now. "Cassie," Stacy whispered, "you take little man and Christopher John, and y'all—" The headlights of 2 more cars appeared in the distance, and Stacy immediately hushed. One of the cars halted on the Granger Road, its lights beaming aimlessly at the blackness of the cotton fields, and the lead car came crazy and fast along the rutted trail toward the Avery house. And before it had rolled to a complete stop, Mr. Jameson leaped out. Remember, he is the lawyer that is really, really kind to the family. But once out of the car, he stood very still, surveying the scene, and then he stared at each of the men as if preparing to charge them in the courtroom, and said softly, "Y'all decide to court here tonight?" There was an embarrassed silence. Then Caleb Wallace spoke up. "Now look here, Mr. Jameson, don't you come messing in this thing." "You do?" warned Thurston haughtily. "And we'll just likely take care of ourselves an inward lover, too, tonight." So now they're threatening Mr. Jameson as well. An electric tenseness filled the air, but Mr. Jameson's placid face was unchanged by the threat. "Jim Lee Barnett and his wife are still alive. Y'all let the sheriff and me take the boy. Let the law decide whether or not he's guilty." "Where's Hank?" someone asked. "I don't see no law." "That's him up at Harlan Granger's," Mr. Jameson said with a wave of his hand over his shoulder. "He'll be down in a minute. Now leave the boy be." "For my money, I say let's do it now," a voice cried. Ain't no need to waste good time and money trying no thieving inward. A crescendo of ugly hate rose from the men as the second car approached. They grew momentarily silent as the sheriff stepped out, and the sheriff looked uneasily at the crowd as if he would rather not be there at all, then at Mr. Jameson. "Where's Harlan?" asked Mr. Jameson. The sheriff turned from Mr. Jameson to the crowd without answering him. Then he spoke to the men. Mr. Granger sent word by me that he ain't gonna stand for no hanging on his place. Notice he emphasized of his place. But he say y'all touch one hair on that boy's heads while he's on this land, and he's gonna hold every man here responsible. The men took the news in grim silence. Then Caleb Wallace cried, "Then why don't we go somewhere else? I said we gotta do is take him down the road and take care of that big black giant of an N-word at the same time." Talking about Mr. Morrison there. "And why not that boy he working for too?" And they're talking about Papa. Yelled Thurston. "Stacy," I gasped. "Hush." A welling affirmation rose from the men. "I got me 3 new ropes," exclaimed Caleb. "New? How come you want to waste a new rope on that N-word?" asked Melvin Sims. "Because that one N-word is, that old one might break." There was a chilling laughter, and the men moved toward their cars, dragging TJ with them. "No!" cried Mr. Jameson, rushing to shield TJ with his own body. "Cassie," Stacy whispered hoarsely. "Cassie, you gotta get Papa now. Tell him what happened. I don't think Mr. Jameson can hold them." "You come too." "No, I'll wait here." "I ain't gonna without you," I declared, afraid that he would do something stupid, like trying to rescue TJ alone. "Look, Cassie, go on. Will you please? Papa know what to do. Somebody's gotta stay here, 'cause they take TJ off in the woods somewhere. I'll be all right." "Well, please, Cassie, trust me, will ya?" I hesitated. You promise you won't go down there by yourself?" "Yeah, I promise. Just get Papa and Mr. Morrison before they hurt them some more." He placed the unlit flashlight in my hand and pushed me up. Clutching little man's hand, and I told him to grab Christopher Johns, and together the 3 of us picked our way along the black path, afraid to turn on the flashlight for fear its light be seen. Thunder crashed against the corners of the world, and the lightning split the sky as we reached the road. But we did not stop. We dared not. We had to reach Papa. All right, we got 1 chapter left. I told you it was going to get crazy. So go ahead, do the activity below. It shouldn't take you very long. And then we will finish on Friday. So I look forward to it. Bye, guys. I'll see you later.